Thank you very much for inviting me among such interesting company. I feel honored to be amongst you. My presentation, myself, I am a psychotherapist in advanced training at Iron Mill College in Exeter. And I have a background in cultural anthropology, and I see clients at a low-cost psychotherapy clinic in Poole. My presentation today is based on the paper that is soon to come out and is called The Hate Script, a Radical Transactional Analysis Perspective. And I'd like to start with a quote from Woods that says, if our language and culture emphasize separateness, non-connectedness, then our stories will do the same. If our culture values connection and belonging, so will our stories. This presentation employs radical TA, transactional analysis theory, and deconstructionism to explore the psychology of unconscious biases, notoriously, difficult to reach and fathom. And I'm using my own upbringing in communist Romania during the 1980s and the widespread discrimination against the Roma as a case study. I thought it was, I think, the best starting point is to look at ourselves before we look in general terms, where potentially our biases, our potential for othering others may reside. Some theoretical background for those who maybe don't come from transactional analysis as modality, and some of the concepts that I'm using very briefly. One is Antiziganism, which is a concept credited to the German anthropologist Bernhard Streeck, who sought to reassign recognition and validity to the experience of discrimination of the Romani and the city community. So Antiziganism is anti-Roma sentiment. And I'm looking at it in this presentation as a symbolic abhorrence that we hold against our own potential to fall and become outsiders. I'm also analyzing it as a fixated, I'm not okay, you're not okay life position, of which I will say more in a minute, and in extreme cases relating to hamartia. Again, a term I'm going to explain in a minute. Also, obviously, a very useful formula here, which I'm sure we are all familiar with from the Radical Psychiatry Manifesto that came out in 1969, developed by Claude Steiner after he attended the San Francisco psychotherapy meetings and group. And he credits alienation as being a combination of oppression and deception or mystification, lying to the oppressed about their own process, about their own peripheral marginalized status and their experience. Another concept is from TA is life script, which was defined by Eric Berne as an unconscious life plan made in childhood, reinforced by parents, justified by subsequent events, and culminating in a chosen alternative. Particularly here, I'm going to look at the tensions between the personal life script and the cultural script, which at which level racism operates as a cultural script, that is, as a life plan learned involuntarily from others, outlining how to feel, think, and behave in response to people of color. This is from Batts in Knowing and Changing the Cultural Script Component of Racism. I will expand the term racism to be combined with xenophobia. So sometimes I will use the terms xenoracism to describe the alienation of the Roma individuals in Romania, but in a wider context. And the hate script, I look at it as being supported by the ideation of purity of race and citizenship, and as having a hamartic component. And now coming back to the term hamartic, this is an interesting concept, and again it was coined by Steiner, who borrowed it from Aristotle, by which Aristotle meant by hamartia as meaning a major flaw in the tragic hero's character. And Steiner defines it as the feature that characterizes tragic scripts, and it is the flaw that finds expression in active and knowing self-destruction. It is effectively a way of dealing with the darkest shadows in our subconscious that we cannot face, and therefore we have to deal with them in ways that are sustainable for us to carry on. Other concepts which I'm sure we are all familiar with, transference and projective identification, and the OK chorale from Ernst that I will come to in a minute. For this, I am using myself as a case study, as I said. This is me, age maybe 5 or 6, juxtaposed to a picture from one of the annual public displays of power and dictatorship. In the pictures there, you see the face of our dictator Nicolae Ceausescu at the time. Why I've chose this picture is just to say that the fragile ego information of a child, of any child under a dictatorship, when under the influence of a cultural parent, as autocratic and as dominant as a dictatorship, there's very little kind of chance of dealing with these things in that situation. So then it's only a process of contamination that we. Sorry, can anybody hear me? Can people hear me?
Yes, could Diane go? Could you switch your Diane? Could you switch your?
No. Maybe I. Let me.
Okay.
Diane, could you switch? Thank you. do go ahead. Apologies.
Okay. So here are some of the messages that informed my cultural script, as well as that of my generation in the 80s. Just to say, the last decade of communism in Eastern Europe and Romania, where I come from, the 80s, also coincided with the first decade of my life. And in transactional analysis, that is for us, we understand that as the decade that creates and sediments our life script. So it's a very important decade. And I've just listed here just some of the messages that myself and my generation have implicitly or openly sometimes received from the culture around us about the Roma minority in Romania and the possible script decisions that one would have made as a response to that. I use the word gypsies and Roma alternatively in the presentation, just to represent either a context of discrimination or a politically correct address. So here they are contextually based. An example, gypsies are dirty and they carry diseases. Potential answer to that, or internalized alienation, is one mustn't come close to a gypsy. I may get contaminated. I realize they sound very brutal, and they were brutal, and they still are brutal, and I want to name them for what they are. I'm not going to use a metaphorical language for it. Gypsies steal and lie, and they have no moral norms. Response: one mustn't invite a gypsy to my house, as they may steal my belongings. One must never trust a gypsy. Gypsies are violent and dangerous. One must avoid gypsies. They might attack, rob, or kidnap me. Gypsies don't value education, are lazy, don't have jobs. They'd rather steal or beg to make ends meet. One mustn't work with a gypsy, as they are unreliable and querulous. Gypsies are emotionally stunted. They don't love their children. They don't send them to school, clean, feed, or clothe them. They make them beg on the streets. One mustn't feel compassionate towards a gypsy person. Now, the potential script outcome, which I am sure that myself as well as others have internalized as a response to these cultural messages that we were fed on constantly from all directions when we were growing up, is that potentially as a white Romanian, one deserves more love, more care, more respect than a gypsy, and one keeps a distance between us and them because it is safe to do so. The oppression and mystification of otherness, from Steiner, therefore results in alienation, but alienation both of the other, which is the process that I've described above, but also of the oppressor from the self. It is what we call in transactional analysis intrapsychic impasse between the cultural parent and the child ego state, otherwise known as internalized alienation. What I'm trying to say by this is that when we participate as perpetrators in oppression and othering a certain group, we also harm ourselves. Yeah, we also alienate ourselves from ourselves. And I'm going to explore a little bit how we're doing this. This is the OK corral that we are using in TA quite a lot. And these are the four life positions that places us in rapport, in relationship with the others around us. And I'm analyzing the sufficiently conscious bias as potentially, to some degree, being part of a life position as I'm okay, you're not okay, otherwise known as the paranoid life position. So the unconscious biases, however, reside much deeper, which is why they proved so difficult to uproot. They sit side by side with our potential as human beings in a much less than perfect world to fall or to fail, and not to be loved or wanted, to be considered better without. And this is the schizoid or the despair position. I'm not okay, and you're not okay. So Antiziganism can thus be regarded as a symbolic abhorrence we hold against our own potential to fall and become outsiders. This is the internalized and self-destructive effect of alienating others on ourselves. Now, what can prevent us from challenging our hate script? Well, we all know that challenging a hate script, challenging our unconscious biases, will bring forth feelings of guilt and shame. And these are not easy feelings to host in our psyche. We try to fight against them instead of sitting with them and analyzing their components. Then confusion at having to let go of familiar beliefs and societal norms or our ethos, which we evaluate as integral part of our identity. This also can prove quite difficult to let go, chip off at your identity because it's unsustainable. It's a very difficult process to undertake. The same process of challenging a hate script threatens to dismantle our cultural parent, and cultural parent is the only thing we have in order to orient ourselves as children and then later as adults, if we haven't self-scrutinized, to orient ourselves in a complicated world. And very likely, if we challenge the cultural parent, we will result experiencing a script backlash, which is effectively an existential threat. People can lose their minds. People can become very confused, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants to experience or live in that state of mind.
Ioana, just to let you know, you just have a minute or two now.
Oh dear, I was told I had 20 minutes. Okay.
15 minutes plus 5 minutes for questions. You've got a couple of minutes.
Okay, I'll try to go really quickly. Other forms of that prevent us from challenging a hate script is the transference, because the fear of deprivation and loneliness and illness and hopelessness and disenfranchisement or social demise is in all of us. And when faced with a group of people who seem to us to play out these terrifying fears in reality, because the Roma are disempowered and they do live in deprivation, our script mechanisms of self-defense against our own fears of destitutions are activated. We transfer these fears to the vulnerable group, contain them in their representation, and kick against these fears by kicking against their symbolic embodiment, the problematic other. This is a quote from Dwight Turner, Intersections of Privilege and Otherness. Fear of the other basically involves a fear of that which is in our own shadow. And it's probably better if I just quickly go to my last slide, which revisits the alienation forma of Claude Steiner, just to see how his original formula of oppression plus mystification that delivers alienation of a particular group can be translated at wider groups and society in general. Oppression, I believe, translates in depression, mystification in post-truth, and we all know how that is being manifested, especially in America at the moment, and alienation, I think it will result in segregation. I will just skip to the conclusion now and say that only by committing ourselves to the difficult work of uprooting the hate component of our script, we can eventually free ourselves from the fear of otherness and become emotional and welcome emotional and physical closeness with other human beings that don't look like us, don't sound like us, love differently than we do, or pray to gods that are not our own. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for stepping in. It's
Not a problem.
well, it's always a little bit disorientating to do that. So thank you. Well, I find it is anyway. Have we got questions or comments? And we've got a few minutes.
Could I ask a question? Can you hear me? Is that okay? Can you hear me? Hi, Ioana. I thought that speech was really good. I really enjoyed it. My ex-wife is Romanian, so I've heard a lot of the things that you were talking about. I remember speaking to her parents and hearing a lot of those things and feeling very reticent to kind of try and challenge them because they were so ingrained. I'd really like to know, when you obviously challenged your hate script, what was the pushback? Did you get a lot of pushback from your family, and how did you handle that?
Sorry, could you repeat? When I challenged my own hate script, you mean?
Yeah, I'm wondering what was your experience of challenging your own hate script? Was it difficult, and did you have a lot of pushback when you maybe challenged other people's views?
It's always there. So every time I go back home, I have two quarrels with everybody that I meet. One is the Antiziganism that I'm talking about here, the Roma sentiment, which is it's rife everywhere still. It hasn't got in any way better. And I don't know really at the societal level what can be done in the years to come, in a reasonable amount of time for this to be addressed, even with the proper language, because we don't have that language yet. And then the other one is Romania as a civil society, but Romania as a whole taking climate change seriously. So both of this, if you think about it, both of these areas are about alienation. It's about separating ourselves either from the environment or from other forms of humanity that we consider ourselves superior to one way or another. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Can I speak?
Sure.
Hi. I think it was a really, really clear talk, and the model is very, very helpful, I think. And I think what you made clear is if we need to dismantle, our cultural parent, I think you said, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
But of course, when we do that, we go through confusion, fear, shame, when we really take on board everything, not just about Roma, but just about any other culture that's around. There's a lot to take on, so lots of difficult truths, if you like, to own, and I think it becomes an existential issue, because what am I, who am I, and then a way out is to just project it all, project all this stuff on the other, and I think that's what's happening now, and with the move to right-wing hatred, really. Yeah, I think that's what's happening. and turning things round. You know, the perpetrator becomes the victim, etc. Yeah. So thank you. You made that very clear.
Yeah, there's a interesting theory of the episcript of Anita English, which says that all of those things that are too hot to handle, you just hand them over to another group or another generation to deal with. It's called a hot potato, passing on a hot potato to, you know, to another group to contain and deal with, rather than dealing within ourselves with it.
Very true. Often true of climate change as well. Oh, the next generation can sort it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just say something very quickly? I thought it's really interesting things that you were talking about, and I was trying to think a bit about how when you talked about the hate script, for example, how there is we could sort of start to think about this, how the script comes from the parents or comes or something like that. But I guess I'm thinking about that something wider and societal. I guess I want to sort of say that in Republic, Plato writes about how you form the ideal state, and the noble lie that you tell to the citizens to be able to better rule them. And one of them that one lie is that, of course, different people have different substances in their souls. So some people have gold, some have silver, some have only brass. And of course, it's ordained who is higher than whom. And I guess I'm thinking that maybe all the things that we talk about has got that sort of structure. You know, that there are people at the top and there are people at the bottom. And we're not the people at the bottom. There's got to be someone lower than us that we can. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just, because you mentioned Aristotle as well, and I thought that was interesting too, about the fatal flaw. But anyway, thank you. Really interesting.
Well, thank you for the analogy with Plato. Thank you.
We're pretty much there, and I'm hoping our next speaker is ready. Is it okay if we move on, Ioana?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.